Hello everybody and welcome to Chess24 and welcome to my game of the day. Today was round one of Norway Chess, the first tournament of 3 tournaments that will take place this year that make up the Grand Chess Tour, the chess equivalent of the Grand Slams. Next year they're talking about adding another tournament as well to make it almost an authentic Grand Slam system, much like they have in tennis. But it's great that chess has got this. And today, in this incredible lineup, we're going to have, of course, not only high-level chess, but a lot of action. And there were a number of really interesting games today. Nakamura versus Hammer was a mess. So I've decided to skip that one. Didn't really understand what was going on there at all. As we speak, Magnus Carlsen is still playing Veselin Topalov, and in true Magnus style is grinding him down. It wouldn't surprise me if he won that game. Anand Caruana was a correct game in many ways. It ended in a draw. Fabiano had no problems with black whatsoever, so a really big success for him. And in the other games, 2 more that I should mention. One I'm going to be analysing. The other one is still ongoing, and that's Maxim Vachier-Lagrave versus Levon Aronian. Maxim, with a dominating position, should be winning his game. But the one that really caught my eye, I should say, and the one that I'm going to analyse for you guys today is the game Giri Grischuk, which was a fantastic game because it featured a lot of tactics, a lot of attacking chess, much to my liking. And Anish Giri was the victor. He played a brilliant game, actually, played very precisely, very convincingly when he had the attack going. And I thought I'd share that with you. So let's have a look. The game started 1 knight f3 and Grischuk played c5, after which Anish now played e4. So it's an interesting transposition into a Sicilian. Of course, normally you start with the pawn move and then play knight f3. And here Grischuk played knight c6. Maybe a small surprise. We know Grischuk is very well versed in the Najdorf system. So curious as to why he didn't play that. So he went for knight c6, which is, of course, the other main way to play the Sicilian. And instead of the open Sicilian with d4, Anish tried the move bishop b5, the so-called Rossolimo Sicilian, an opening I've been playing most of my life, and one putting your bishop on b5 in the Sicilian is absolutely fine, in my opinion. Both with the pawn on d6 and the knight on c6. And Anish feels the same. It's just a very simple move because there is an immediate threat to compromise the black structure with bishop takes c6. But actually, Grischuk allows this with the move g6. And white here has got to make a decision about how he's going to proceed. He can either give up the bishop pair, play bishop takes c6 and obtain certain positional advantages. But at the same time, of course, what you do by playing this move is you allow black to potentially create a lot of initiative in middle games, especially if the bishops get active. Or you can play a move like castles and just play a more simple way of trying to erect a pawn center via c3 and d4. 2 different ways of playing, but interesting that Giri chose bishop takes c6. Here, b takes c6 was Grischuk's reply. D takes c6 has also been seen in many games, but capturing this way with the pawn is a bit more dry, and I think Grischuk's style lends to more dynamic positions. I think he feels a lot more comfortable when there's chances for him. And in this position here, when you take with the d pawn, for example, the move d3, white structure is very pleasant, and although black may very well be fine in the main lines, it's a bit more of a passive approach. So that's why Grischuk chose b takes c6, white castled, bishop g7 and rook e1. So this is the main line here. And black's got a decision to make, really, here about what he should be doing. Grischuk played a very unusual move. He played the move rook b8, which on the face of things, actually makes a lot of sense, because you put the rook on the semi-open file, and we're taught that we should put rooks there, and also you threaten this pawn on b2. But you don't see that move so much. Normally what happens is black plays knight h6. Again, you put the knight on h6 in this particular position rather than f6, because on f6 a lot of the time it gets hit by an e5 advance. So knight h6, and then let's say c3 castles and d4 takes, and we get a position where white's got the pawn center, but in exchange black's got the two bishops. And once more, there's been lots of games in these lines, and it's a complex struggle ahead for sure. But rook b8 was a slightly perhaps unexpected move. But what was even more expected was Giri's move h3 here, just ignoring the threat. And I think the point is that if you take this off and play rook takes, I think white's idea is that he wanted to either go queen c1 or maybe d4. The point of queen c1 is if the rook comes back, let's say to b7, suddenly you can play this very odd queen maneuver, queen to a3, hitting this pawn on c5. And the problem black has is that he's won a pawn, but you don't really feel like he's won the pawn because of these double pawns. And on top of that, he's completely neglected his development on the king side. This knight yet to get out. And once you give up this dark squared bishop, a lot of the time, and as we'll see in the game, how important this dark squared bishop is as a defender, a lot of the time you can find yourself in a lot of trouble. We'll illustrate that a bit later. So Grischuk didn't take it. He played another slightly odd move, the move queen to c7. And he's trying to find a number of sort of useful waiting moves. I think that's his idea here. But now Giri punishes this, plays very energetically. Plays the move c3 with the standard idea of going d4, knight f6. But he doesn't go d4 here, because black has played knight f6. He hits this knight with e5. And after knight d5, plays a very good move indeed. He plays the move c4. So he's actually lost a tempo. He's played c3 and c4. But the point is that with the queen now on c7, white takes advantage of the fact that black doesn't have the maneuver knight c7 to e6. Actually, in a lot of these lines, when the black knight is developed to f6 and then to d5 and then gets hit by c4, this is a very common maneuver. And the black knight sits very nicely on e6, does a good job of protecting c5 and controlling some key squares. But now it has to go to an awkward spot. Grischuk chose knight b4. Whether that's the best or not is arguable, but of course knight f4 runs into d4, which is very unpleasant. So can understand why he went knight b4. But Giri again plays a very good move, plays d4 anyway, because after c takes d4, well, he doesn't play queen takes d4 here because that would run into the embarrassing knight c2 with a family fork. But instead plays the important intermediate move, a3, forcing the knight to a very rough square, as the Germans say, Springer am Rand, bring Komma and Schand. It's the only thing I ever really learned in German. Knight on the rim is dim, as we say. And actually, this knight is one of the causes for black's downfall in this game, because it doesn't quite get back into the game. White now took on d4, and black, already struggling, lack of space, lack of coordination, plays a move that I didn't particularly like. I think castling is a bit premature. I prefer the move c5 here for black, although this does concede the d5 square, so I think that's why Grischuk didn't play it. So, for example, after queen d3, castles, knight c3, white still got an edge, and the problem is also when you play c5, you really do cut this knight out of the game. It's got no entry back. So it was a really tough spot already for Grischuk after queen takes d4. But the problem with castles is that now this gave white the option to play c5, and suddenly these pawns, it's almost like an advanced Maroczy bind where the pawns have just been shifted up slightly. And it's very difficult for black to actually get any of his pieces out, whereas white's play is just automatic almost. You can bring the knight out, the bishop out, and you're also looking at all kinds of attacking options, which we'll soon see in the game, in fact. Here, Grischuk thought for about half an hour, I believe, and after a long think, played the only move that, to the human eye, makes sense. The computer will come up with moves like Queen B7 or Queen D8, but it's very difficult to play these moves. Just passing moves, really. They're very passive, and White would enjoy huge initiative. So he played D6, but the problem is that after D6, simply takes, and actually White wins a pawn and maintains the initiative. The problem is you can't take on D4 here, because now after D takes C7 you attack the rook, and of course White would emerge a piece up in this line. So Grischuk played Queen B6, but now the move that I mentioned before in this kind of structure, Queen H4, and the attack almost plays itself. Black would love to take on B2 here, but the problem is after takes, and now just the simple knight BD2, White covers the rook on A1 and also threatens just to massacre Black with these knights. And look at the holes around the Black king. That's why it's so important to maintain the dark square bishop a lot of the time. Even if you can win a pawn here with Black, a lot of the time it's going to work out badly for you. So after Queen H4, Grischuk played Knight C5. Again, it's an understandable move. He wants to bring the knight back in. But once again, Giri played a fantastically practical and strong move. Bishop to E3, pinning the knight, with ideas of winning it. So Black got out of the pin with Queen takes B2, but now just Knight BD2. And White's initiative is just huge. He's given back the pawn, but managed to complete development. On top of that, there's now Rook AB1 with a threat in the air. So Black felt he had to play Knight D7 to actually cover this rook. But as we see, White was happy to give up another pawn, Rook AB1, takes to push this knight away even further. And look at these guys. They're back home, not doing anything. And now White is ready to use... Oh, excuse me. White is ready to use all of his pieces, including this pawn, which can be counted as a piece. Garry Kasparov would call that a piece. In fact, Gary was there in Norway today for the first round, and there are no defenders bar the bishop on G7. So what do? You get rid of the last defender. This is classic attack in chess. Get rid of all the defenders until your opponent is left defenseless. Bishop H6, Knight D7, White took on G7. Knight G5 was also very strong. And actually it's this configuration with the Queen on H4, Bishop on H6, Knight on G5 against the Fianchetto Bishop, which is very strong, because you just threaten to win on H7 and there's not much that can happen. And after Knight F6, Knight D4, this would have been very strong as well. But Bishop takes H6, Bishop takes G7 was good, because after check, keeping the pawn, King G8, and now Knight E4. Again, we can see the problems with Black's position, just so many holes. Rook E8 was played, and now another, a really great move. The move King H2. That's a move you should be proud of. This is, a lot of amateurs or beginners will say, well, what's that move? You're not doing it, you're moving the king, aren't you wasting a move here? No, actually quite the opposite. This is a strong prophylactic move. White has seen that in a number of combinations he wants to play Knight F6, but he doesn't want to get hit by a rook takes rook with check. A lot of the time he can just give up the rook because there's going to be mate on the cards. So a sample line might be, for example, the move A5, which is actually what happened in the game, Knight Fg5, and let's say A4. Well, now the move Knight F6 check would be just game over, because after takes, White can now play Queen takes F6. And the problem is Rook takes E1, he would love it to be check, but it's not, because you've got Queen takes F7, and then mate on H7, or mate on F8, whichever you want. So that's the problem, so that's why King H2 is such a nice move here. So A5 happened, but now Black is just dead lost. Knight Fg5, and it's all but over. Grischuk played Rook F8, but after check, Queen takes. The threats of Rook E7 followed by D7 and taking on here just means that the game is over and the Queen is cut out. Grischuk tried Queen A2, but here after Rook E7, actually the move Knight takes H7 was also very pretty and very strong. The point being after takes Rook E4. It's another very interesting configuration and pattern that you should all remember at home. So that was strong. And But instead, rook e7, well, that was good enough, really, to bring home the bacon. Threatening d7. Bishop f5 was tried, but now knight takes f7 was also a very nice shot, because after rook takes f7, rook e8 check is forced mate. So black had to give up the queen, but after takes, white actually won the a5 pawn, and the rest of the game doesn't really require any commentary. White has just got a huge material advantage, and black cannot set up any kind of a fortress with the rook and bishop. So after a few more moves, advancing the pawns, and queen e5, Grischuk had enough. So a great win by Giri, a great display of attacking prowess. That is how you carry out an attack. A bit of gumption, a bit of get up and go about the attack. But also we saw a really great attack also is one that does have an element of prophylaxis. You want to make sure that your opponent has no counter strike. So I really like the move king h2. Great game by Giri. Hope you enjoyed it, and check out the following round's game of the day with me. But for now, have a good night.